It's not about you. And that's why most presentations don't land. Not because the work wasn't good, but because it's built from the wrong perspective. The problem is you're in your head, not theirs. I'm Michael Bruner. I help technical professionals translate expertise into meaning and impact. In this video, I'll show you how to understand what your audience cares about and how to frame your message so that it connects. Let's start with what's actually going wrong. You've been working on this project for 6 months. The last 4 weeks, nothing but slides, data, charts, format. You know this material inside and out. You built the presentation the way you experience it, linearly, from the beginning, walking them through the steps, the decisions, the findings, as if they lived through it with you. Strike one. You worked on your voiceover. You even memorized it word for word. The night before, out of nervousness, you stay up too late tweaking the slides. Oops, now they're different than the pre-read. Strike two. You're nervous about trying to remember it all. With your mind racing, you don't sleep well. You skip your morning workout and you over-caffeinate. As you glance at the meeting notice to check the room location, you realize you don't know all the people that are going to be in the room. Strike three. Suddenly, you're live. You talk a million miles an hour, powered by espresso and adrenaline. With a flurry of slides, you blast through your 30-minute time slot in 15 minutes. When you finally look up and take a moment to breathe, you see the look on their faces. Some are confused, some are checked out, some are checking their phones. Some are somewhere else entirely. You sense the disconnect. They didn't get it. But instead of asking for questions, you circle around and say again what didn't work the first time. More words, more explanation, not more understanding. It didn't help. The meeting ends. Someone says, we'll revisit this again next quarter. You walk out stunned. Not because you were not prepared, not because the work wasn't solid. You thought you did everything right, and yet somehow it still didn't land. And it had nothing to do with your competency or the hard work you put in. It had everything to do with where your focus was. You were in your head, you should have been in theirs. Some presentations fail even before they begin. Not because they were bad, not because you didn't prepare enough. They fail because of one fundamental violation. They violated the audience principle. It's all about the audience. Every book on the shelf, every movie that's ever been in a theater, they were made for one purpose. They were made to create an experience for an audience, a paying audience. Not the author, not the director. The audience is the entire point. But under pressure, when careers and credibility and compensation depend on that presentation, we tend to revert to what feels safe. We tend to revert to what we know. We focus on our slides, we focus on the delivery, the things that we think are in our control. We focus on our work. And a lot of times, if they're stressed, we come in with guns blazing, and we forget entirely about addressing the needs of the people in the room. What you didn't know is that they had heard great things about you. They were excited to meet you and see you in action, to see how you work and how you were on your feet. They were looking to see whether you might fit a bigger role in the company's leadership team. They came in leaning towards yes, but you made sure that didn't happen. Now you're a big question mark. You have other strengths, but under pressure, you came across very one-dimensional. And that dimension was not in tune with the audience. We all nod when we hear know your audience. But what does it really mean? What are the implications? How do you practically activate the audience principle when it matters most? Before you build a single slide, before you rehearse a single line, walk through the audience discovery framework. It's 3 questions, and the answers guide and inform presentations that land. Who is your audience really? Executives isn't a specific enough audience. VPs with pressure to reduce costs without cutting headcount, that's an audience. Technical professionals who need to justify innovation budgets to a skeptical CFO, that's an audience. Get targeted. Study them. Know what drives them before you walk in the room. What function are they in? How long have they been in the role? What is their background and their previous experiences? How big is their team? How do they operate? Are there dynamics between the leaders that you're presenting to that you need to navigate? The more you know about your audience, the better the chances that you can connect with them. When you violate the who, you speak to no one. When you don't know specifically who's in the room and what they care about, what threatens them and what keeps them up at night, you default to generic. Generic gets filtered out. Leaders don't lean in for a generic message. They have other things to worry about. Put it into practice. Before your next presentation, Write down the names of the people who are going to be in the room. Next to each one, write down their title, their function, and how well you know them. If you can't do it, you don't know your audience yet. But this exercise will help you get there. Once you know who's in the room, you can start mapping out what matters to them. Once you know who the audience is, you can start working on the why, which is what they care about, their attention. Start by asking questions like these to identify what they care about. I call these the 3 Gs. Goals, what are their priorities? What are their objectives? What are their incentives? Gaps. What's the gap between where they are and where they need to be? Gotchas. What are their concerns? What keeps them up at night? Some of these questions are about business tensions, but some of them go deeper than that and get more personal and more emotional. The reality is that they have open loops in their brain that they're thinking about. They have problems to solve, and you're competing against those open loops when you're presenting. Connect your communication to one of those open loops and tensions, and you'll have their attention. When you violate the why, you lose them in a sentence. We have 47 slides covering revenue, operational efficiency, and customer acquisition costs. The audience is already checked out. They don't care about the 47 slides. What they care about is, are they going to hit their targets? So put it into practice, using the goals, using the gaps, using the gotcha questions. Find out what matters to them. Find their tension. Then write your opening sentence. If it starts with, I'm going to walk you through, you're probably on the wrong path. Rewrite it. Try, we're missing our cost reduction target by 15%. Today, I'm going to share one surprising insight and an idea that could close that gap. Now you have their attention. Use their attention as your filter. Every slide, every example, every story should address the tension. If it doesn't, it gets cut. Now it's easier to find the core message of your slides and tailor it to your audience's needs. Don't start with what you want to say. Start with what matters to them. If you build the presentation around their tension, you're building it for impact. So we've talked about who is your audience and the why, which is what matters to them. The third element is the how to engage them. Decide how you're going to engage the audience before you walk in. The most effective communicators plan their engagement moves just like they plan their content, deliberately and specifically. Will you open with a question that surfaces attention? Will you pause after an insight and invite a reaction? Will you frame a decision and ask them to weigh in? Ask for a show of hands. Will you pass around samples, co-create a solution so that they own the outcome? The method of engagement matters less than the intention. When you decide in advance how you're going to pull them in, you stop performing, you stop presenting, and you start connecting. And connection is what moves people from interested to committed. When you violate how, you tend to lose them in the middle. When you talk at people for 30 minutes, their default mode network in their brain activates. They start daydreaming, they start thinking about dinner, they're mentally checked out. Engagement isn't just a nice to have, it's a neurological necessity. Before you finalize your presentation, identify 3 specific moments where you're going to engage and connect with your audience. Could be a question, could be a pause, it could be a more sophisticated audience engagement mechanism. Write them into your structure. That's the key. Put them in your plan, not as an afterthought, part of the plan. Make them participants in discovering the direction, not passengers on your information tour. To make room for the how, you may have to trim your what. It feels like a sacrifice, but it's actually a strategy, and it has multiple benefits. Your core message gets tighter, it gets punchier, and the space that you create with the audience engagement mechanisms creates space for them to grapple with what it means. That space is where understanding forms, and that's how ideas land. When you operate from the audience principle, it feels different. It sounds different. You know it's working because the room will tell you. Eye contact holds. They're tracking with you, not their phones. When you reference their challenges by name, heads nod. Buy-in starts to happen. Someone says, yes, exactly, before you even finish your sentence. Energy in the room shifts from evaluation to engagement. They stop checking their watches and waiting for you to finish and start building on what you're saying. The conversation starts to take a life of its own. And sometimes when it lands, they'll come and find you afterwards. That's not just a presentation, that's an audience-centered conversation that mattered. When you make it more about them, you might actually become more influential. When you demonstrate the deep understanding of their world, they trust you more. When you structure your message around their needs, they engage. Remember the person who walked out of the room stunned? They had the expertise, they had done the work. What they didn't have was the audience. Not because they weren't capable, but because they were in their own head. Your expertise matters, your ideas matter, your work matters, but only if it lands, and it only lands when you start with the audience. If you found this helpful, watch the tension video in the description below.